expertise I've just talked about, geographical dispersion. There is an associate editor for our journal everywhere. Everywhere that there is good science and good clinical practice in transplantation, there's an associate editor. So we have a representative, if you like, out there in the environment. So they're people that any author can talk to. Give them a ring. That, you know, if I get a particularly, should we say, politically sensitive topic in the US, then I don't give it to somebody in the US to handle. I give it to somebody in Europe or Asia to handle, so that we can manage those tensions.
You know, one of the things that helped me to think about why it was necessary to diversify the editorial board was when we took some time to sort of step back and think about what's the purpose, the focus, the mission and vision for the journal. And very simply, right, we want to disseminate content that is going to position researchers, evaluators, practitioners, policymakers to actually improve the conditions, circumstances, outcomes of Americans, all people. And if we think about it, if that is the goal, then we need to have representation on our editorial board that reflects that. And so it really started several years ago, and it was very intentional, right? And so we started to look at, do we have diversification, of course, related to race and ethnicity, but did we have diversification in terms of geographic location, discipline, content expertise, sexual orientation, the types of research approaches that people bring to the table, quantitative, qualitative, mixed method approach. And we just started kind of looking across all these different areas. And that's why it's really important, I think, for people to hear that it really requires time, right? There's that moment when you arrive. I think about 2-3 years ago, I think we started to sort of we've arrived at a place where people could see it, right? They could feel it. They can read about it in the papers that were being published, that all the work kind of showed up, right? And people started to acknowledge and ask the question, well, when did you start? How long did it take? So I think it's important to start somewhere with the understanding that there's some quick wins. But in order to sort of institutionalize the benefits of having diversity in multiple ways, it takes time. And I think that one of the outcomes of that is we have seen the journal's impact factor increase. We've also seen the content of papers that come into the journal looks very differently. The authors who generate those papers, that looks very different than it did many years ago. And I think people feel good about that, right? And I think that if we're able to give people the permission to know that it takes time, right? It doesn't happen overnight. I think then people will understand it's not something you do right away to sort of be able to say to individuals, groups, and organizations that we did something, but it's much more than that, much more than that.
We do have, we do actively recruit new reviewers. We've done this for quite a while. I think initially we started with email campaigns. A few years ago, we set up a form where reviewers could send their contact information to us. We'd share that person's name and CV with the editors-in-chief, but we found that it wasn't a very effective way to get information to the associate editors about new people who wanted to serve on the reviewer board. At this point, we are referring new people to Reviewer Hub, which again is a tool that integrates with Editorial Manager and allows individuals to volunteer to review for our specific journal and others if they wish. So we're directing people there. We'd like to begin a training program.
Yeah, it took a lot of intention because, right, we have been dealing with nagging public health issues and challenges in this country and really around the world. We get papers from around the world for a long time. And so it's really important to begin to say, not one group, not one institution, not one discipline, not one philosophical approach holds all the answers to all of these complex issues, factors, circumstances that create these health outcomes that we see. And we've been struggling with them for such a long time. Why wouldn't we want to find out the best thinking from an array of individuals who bring talents, strengths, and experiences to the table to force us to begin to say, we need to think about things differently, and we need to include individuals that can help us think about things differently, having those individuals at the table. And I think my role as the editor-in-chief is to be a facilitator of transparent and honest conversation. That's my role. So my role is to help individuals navigate through tough conversations. And then when we get to the other side, acknowledge the fact that we got there because of the diverse voices, experiences, disciplines that have been at the table. And then everyone can celebrate in offering something new, hopefully, to the country that trickles down, not just with our editorial board, but with the kind of papers that we publish in the journal. And then those who are positioned to use that information, I think it then gives everyone something that is more realistic, real world based, science driven, but meets everyone hopefully where they are and find ways to use that content that we publish.
We like to have a healthy stable of editorial board members. We keep detailed statistics on the performance of reviewers. We look at how often they accept invitations. We look at how often they provide reviews on time. And roughly annually, we go over this table and we identify who are the stars. We also then provide the list of perhaps, let's say, the top 20% of reviewers during the year. We circulate that to the associate editors and say, these are the people who've really done well. They're not on the editorial board, but as external reviewers, they've really helped us a lot. Should we invite these people onto the editorial board? And typically we'll get a lot of yeses to that question. We also invite the associate editors to suggest people they know to be members of the editorial board. And then after people have been on the editorial board, typically for 2 years, we will rotate them off, and unless there's particularly good reason to keep them. If we're short of expertise in a particular area, then we might ask them to extend. But it's not, when people are invited to join the editorial board, it's for a fixed term rather than an indefinite duration. So there's always turnover. We're always saying goodbye to people who've helped us for 2 or 3 years, and then looking for star reviewers to replace and refresh the editorial board.
Nutrition is a field where there are quite a few women in the field, so we don't have the sex and gender problem that I think some of the hard sciences may have. Women are fairly well represented on our editorial boards, especially since 2022 and the advent of the Black Lives Matter movement. This has been something that we've been talking more and more about in senior leadership. But even before then, one of our editors in particular was working to diversify. He brought on the first associate editor that I'm aware of based in Africa. And I am really proud to say that we have people on our editorial board from all 6 habitable continents. And we certainly continue to consider that as we maintain and expand our editorial board. Our newest journal has a special section dedicated to food and nutrition of Indigenous peoples, and that has an associate editor responsible for it who works closely with the American Indian community around her. And I'm especially proud of that emphasis on Native Americans and providing a venue to publish that research, as well as funding for it.
And are you actively looking to diversify the editorial board or reviewer pool with regard to demographics, geography, or career level, for example?
Yeah, we absolutely take that very much into account when we're looking for new editorial board members. And I really should have mentioned that when you asked me earlier about looking for new editorial board members. We have geographic targets. We're also very keen on gender equality, and we definitely take that into account when selecting editorial board members. And we have divided the globe up into a set of regions, and that it's finer grained than just the continents of the world as well. And we want to make sure we have people in all continents roughly in proportion to the usage that the journals have in those areas. And that is a consideration. And if we decide that a certain part of the world is seeing fewer people than it should be, we'll go back to the associate editors and say, well, we need to adjust this. We need more people. Think harder. More people from this area, and we'll make sure that we have a defensible correspondence between the usage of the journal and the people who are making the decisions and providing the reviews. And that happens at the level of the associate editors as well. We're very keen to have an international group of associate editors, and we do.
But one of the things that we did early on is that we brought in an external panel to critique us. And we brought in a panel that was very diversified, had experience in this area and had done this, for many years. And they told us the types of questions that they wanted to ask us, the type of information that they wanted us to share with them that would give them a sense of how well we've been doing. And I tell you, it's a very different assessment, right, than when you're critiquing yourself. Right, is that when you have other individuals who come in and ask these really tough questions. And so that was one of the things that we did, early on up front. And then we also had to get a commitment from the organization. So if it's a publisher, an institution that's supporting the journal, I think it's really important early on to begin to say, we want to do things differently. We want to feel, look differently, and perform things differently. Can we get your support in helping us to do that? And then identify, ways that won't be too overwhelming, too challenging, where that can come about. We did spend some time up front just thinking about some basic things that we wanted to put in place. So principles of engagement around diversifying the editorial board were adopted, such things such as, that we wanted to make sure that the individuals who came on board had the space to give us the feedback that they needed, and not feel as though they're going to be inhibited in any way to actually doing that, and that individuals had an opportunity to really have their voices heard, and that as a journal, we were going to do something with that information, right? So we're not going to just put out a public, statement about how we are trying to diversify the journal. We wanted the experience of those who are coming on board who may not have been at the table with us or in this capacity anywhere else, that they would be given an opportunity to share and provide feedback to us, but that we would actually do something with that feedback. And then the other thing that we decided to do was that no matter where we were along in the journey, we would share with the public where we were. So we started to disseminate updates on the journal's website. We also adopted a column that I call the Editor-in-Chief column. And in the Editor-in-Chief column, which is published 3 times a year, we promised the public, our readers, that we would provide them updates on things that we are trying to do a little bit better around.